We are at the hospital. Not how we thought we'd be starting this.
Good job, Melissa.
I had every intention of filming this entire birth experience and just vlogging from start to finish. But as births go, you can't exactly plan for what's gonna happen, and it just looked very different than my first birth experience and kind of what I was, I guess, expecting loosely. When we showed up at the hospital, which I'll get into, I did not at all think we would be staying. So I didn't start filming really because I didn't think there was anything to be reported. But we did film some clips along the way, so I'll definitely be inserting those throughout the story and just kind of filling in the gaps and giving an accurate representation of what the day actually looked like.
I'm also blessed to have a sister who is also a very talented photographer, and she was present to both support me and capture the experience. In addition to taking pictures of this birth experience that I'll cherish forever, she captured some short video clips throughout the process, which I'll include in addition to the vlog footage we're able to get. Her photography website is going to be linked in the description down below, so definitely check that out.
I wanted to start first by just backtracking a little bit, just talking about my pregnancy experience and my history and my birth preferences going into this delivery. If you're not interested in any of that, you're welcome to fast forward to the next timestamp where I'll start talking about the actual labor and delivery experience. When I found out I was pregnant with Monroe, we were not at all trying. I was not expecting it. I was very surprised. If you know my history at all, you know that before I got pregnant with my first daughter, Renly, I had 3 miscarriages, all within the span of a year. I got all of my labs done to try to figure out what was going on. Everything came back normal, and I had an endocrinology appointment scheduled for a couple months out, but ended up getting successfully pregnant with my first daughter, Renly. So that appointment ended up getting canceled and I never went. So this time around, since I had had a successful delivery, a successful pregnancy, it was just kind of business as usual. The plan was to just treat me as normal patient, but I did get blood work done right away just to see my levels and just kind of have an idea if this was gonna be a viable pregnancy or not. My first 2 sets of blood work came back normal. They were doubling as normal. Everything looked good. There was nothing to worry about. So they stopped doing them and I had my growth scan scheduled. But 2 weeks, I would say, after I found out I was pregnant, I had some bleeding, which obviously makes you worried no matter what in pregnancy, but it's especially triggering when you've had losses, just because your mind immediately starts going to the worst places. Bleeding equals loss in my mind because that had been my experience. And so immediately I was pretty worried. So I called the midwives and got back in for additional blood work, and my ultrasound was scheduled for a week out, I want to say. And my levels this time were not rising at the pace that they typically like to see, which wasn't very reassuring. For some reason, I still felt really at peace. Obviously in the back of my mind I was worried, but for some reason I just had this feeling that it was gonna be okay. When I talked to the nurse, which was not my midwife, the nurse that called me to go over the blood work basically just said, yeah, your levels are rising, but not at the pace that they should be, so we'll see what happens. It could go either way. That was pretty much the response that I got, which was not very reassuring, not very comforting, and upset me quite a bit, but I knew I had my ultrasound in a week or so, so we would just have to wait and see at that. On my ultrasound, everything looked good. She was measuring right on track. Her heart rate was 112, which was, the ultrasound was at 6 weeks. So her heart rate was kind of low from what I was comfortable with, because the very first pregnancy that I had that resulted in loss, there was a heart rate at the ultrasound that was 109, and a week later I ended up miscarrying that baby. So the heart rate wasn't super reassuring to me. I was pretty nervous about it, but they reassured me that it was just early. The baby's heart had just started beating and it was very normal for the gestational age. So we did schedule a repeat ultrasound a couple weeks out just to check and make sure that baby was still growing and everything was on track, and it was back to business as normal. I continued to have bleeding on and off throughout the entire pregnancy. I would say roughly every 2 weeks or so, I would have a random episode of bleeding and then it would subside. No other symptoms other than feeling like she was really low the entire pregnancy. I didn't have a bunch of contractions. I didn't have Braxton Hicks. To be honest, I don't even know if I know what Braxton Hicks feels like. I felt like tightness, and there's just so much going on when you're very pregnant, like baby moving around and shifting and just feeling tightness and big the whole time. I don't know that I can accurately say like, oh, those were Braxton Hicks. I know when I'm having contractions and I know when I'm not, and that's the extent of it. But fast forward a little bit, I just continued to have periodic bleeding episodes, like every 2 weeks or so, was continuing to be monitored. They couldn't find any reason that I would continue to be bleeding. At my 20-week anatomy scan, there was an abnormality with my placenta. I had a circumvallate placenta, which they explained to me essentially just means that the sides of the placenta kind of folded up on top of itself, and that they see it a lot more now just as technology has gotten better with ultrasounds and being able to see more detail around the placenta, that it really was nothing to worry about, but that we would repeat a growth scan at 32 weeks because the only thing that they do see that with that occasionally is if the baby's not getting enough nutrition and there's growth restriction, then that would be a problem. So they would know more around 32 weeks, and we would be able to see that on the scan. But around 31 weeks, I did have a really weird situation where I went to the bathroom and I just felt not right. I could tell that baby was really, really low, and it just felt like, honestly, it felt like she was literally coming out. Like, I wasn't having contractions, I wasn't having anything. It just felt like I had so much heaviness down there that it just didn't feel right. So I called my midwives, and I actually had my regular scheduled appointment the next morning, and they kind of talked me off the ledge. I wasn't having contractions. I could feel baby move. It really wasn't an emergency. Baby wasn't just gonna fall out of me, which is what it felt like was going to happen. They were comfortable with me just coming in the morning when I was regularly scheduled to. So that's what I planned on doing. I went in, and they did go ahead and check me and look, discovered that I was 2 centimeters dilated and 50% effaced at 31 weeks. She did kind of feel and had me do just like a little push while she was feeling, and said she could definitely feel the baby's head right there. She was very low. Because they don't typically check people that early, there's no real like indication to know like, is that normal for my body to already be dilating at that point? There's nothing to compare it off of. So that could mean that I was already going to labor. It could mean absolutely nothing at all. But because of the heaviness that I was feeling and the bleeding episodes and just the history, she did put me on pelvic rest. So I was on pelvic rest from 31 weeks on and had my growth scan at 32 weeks, to which everything looked great. Baby was a little bit on the small side. She was like 20th percentile, I want to say, for weight, but the doctor said it was way outside of the range of anything he would be worried about. We just pressed on as normal. Continued to have my regular scheduled appointments every 2 weeks up until 36 weeks, I think, and then they go to weekly after that. I was taken off of pelvic rest at 36 weeks because at that point they were comfortable with whatever were to happen. I no longer had to take precautions or anything like that. So 36 weeks I was taken off of pelvic rest. At 38 weeks, they asked if I wanted to be checked. I did go ahead and get checked just because I wanted an idea of, have I just been sitting at 2 centimeters this whole time and it's not a problem at all? Have I continued to dilate more? Because again, I hadn't felt any contractions or cramping or anything like that. So I got checked again. The midwife was surprised, I could tell, when she checked me. Her eyes got big and she said, "Oh, you're 4 centimeters dilated and I can feel the baby's head right there." She's like, "Yeah, I can feel the baby's head right there." I looked back on the notes from that and I was 4 centimeters dilated, 80% effaced, and had a bulging bag of water, which she didn't tell me that part. It was interesting looking back at notes and seeing that, but that was on September 7th that I found out that I was that dilated. And she actually started going over telling me, okay, so this person's working this weekend, this person's here Monday, you'll see me on this day. Like she was fully expecting to see me there that weekend, which I thought was funny. And I had this feeling with my first daughter as well. For some reason, my 38-week appointment, I just had this feeling it's my last one. And I had the same exact feeling with my first daughter, and she came at 39 weeks on the dot. I was supposed to have my next appointment the following day. I had that same feeling that was my last appointment. With my first daughter, I had an unmedicated hospital delivery. Absolutely loved that experience. I went into it always saying that I was open to it, but I would like the least amount of intervention as possible. I would really like my body to just do what it's doing, but I was open to whatever needed to happen to get things back on track if I stalled out, if I started to feel discouraged, tired, outside of what I felt I was capable of. But I was able to have a very smooth, uncomplicated delivery with my first, so that was my plan with this one as well. I really wanted to be able to listen to my body and to just do what I felt like I was capable of doing since I had done it already. I felt felt a lot more confident going into this one, knowing that I had done it before, but it was also a little bit intimidating because I knew just how intense it was gonna get. With my first, I only knew what the next contraction felt like, and I didn't know how intense it was gonna get. With this one, I already knew kind of what the end felt like, and so I was a little bit more intimidated knowing, okay, whew, we've got a long road ahead of us, but I still really wanted to have as low intervention as possible. I was still delivering at the hospital because I did really love the midwives that I saw. I did look into potentially home birth around 20 weeks or so. It is not covered by my insurance, and so I would have had to pay out of pocket, and unfortunately with the way things had just shook out with me quitting my job, changing insurance partway through pregnancy already at that point, I had already paid close to $6,000 in deductibles and had hit my out-of-pocket max already, so I wasn't going to pay anything if I just continued on with the hospital delivery, whereas if I did switch to home birth at that point, I would have paid an additional $6,000, and I just couldn't justify it in my head. So I did just go ahead and continue on with the plan of delivering in the hospital, unmedicated if possible, with the midwives that I saw with my first daughter. On September 9th, we had a wedding to attend. I kept making jokes. We all kept making jokes about, oh, what if I go into labor at the wedding? The one thing I just did not want to have happen was I did not want my water to break. I did not want it to be a big spectacle. I did not want to cause a scene. I didn't want anything like that. So I was a little nervous about that. With my first daughter, my water did break in a very dramatic way. It was very loud. It was very aggressive, but I was already in active labor at that point. So I had that in the back of my mind that the chances of my water just breaking like that were very small, but it was always a thought that I had. So we go to the wedding. I could not focus. I just felt off. I can't explain it because I wasn't having contractions. Realistically, there was like nothing happening in my body that would say like, oh, I'm in labor. And I didn't feel like I was in labor. I just felt off. So through the whole ceremony, I just was thinking in the back of my mind, like, I don't know, I just feel strange. And everybody that I'd run into kept making jokes about me like dancing the baby out on the dance floor and stuff. And we talked about how funny it would be if we showed up to the hospital dressed to the nines, makeup full done and everything. But yeah, through the whole ceremony, I just could not focus. I just felt kind of weird. So as soon as the ceremony ended, I went to the bathroom, and sure enough, when I was in the bathroom, there was like a big gush of blood, which wasn't completely abnormal because I had been, like I said, bleeding on and off throughout my entire pregnancy, but this was different. It was a lot more, and it was kind of like watery blood a little bit. It was just a little bit different. So I thought it was best to call my midwife and just see if I should be concerned or not. So I stepped away right after the ceremony and I called them, and they said, just based on how dilated I already was and my history of just this bleeding on and off, and my first labor was relatively quick, and they had a feeling that this one was going to go very fast as well because she had been low for so long and I was already 4 centimeters dilated. I only had 6 to go. They just thought it was going to be kind of quick. So they said it doesn't hurt to just come get checked in. In fact, they recommend that I come and get looked at. I was a little bit annoyed by it because I felt like I was just gonna be sent home. I didn't want to leave the wedding and go to the hospital just to be sent home and make a big ordeal for my parents who were watching my oldest daughter at home. So we kind of just took our time. The wedding was at 4 p.m. So I went to the bathroom right after that, probably around like 5, I would say, and called the midwife at that time. Around 5:20 is when I texted my parents and said that they recommended I come in, but that I wasn't having any contractions. I wasn't in a big hurry. So we were gonna stay and just eat dinner, have some dessert, and just take our time. We were about a half hour away from the hospital, and we did happen to put our hospital bags in the car before we left the wedding. That was the last thing we needed to check off our list that we had not done yet, was to just go ahead and put our hospital bags in the car. So we did get that part taken care of right before we left to the wedding, which worked out really well. We just kind of took our time and ate dinner and had dessert. Around 7:45 is when we left the wedding and decided to go to the hospital. My mom was kind of like eagerly texting me the whole time, like, are you still there? Like, when are you going? She was kind of nervous. And it worked out well too that I already had childcare for my oldest, but we went in and I fully expected to just be going back home. I was like, this is annoying. We're gonna stop at the hospital, go through the whole ordeal, and they're just gonna send us home. It's gonna be nothing. It's gonna be fine. I'm not having contractions. I'm not having this baby yet. So we get to the hospital, we walk in, and immediately people start making comments about how I'm in heels and a dress, and Cameron's in, slacks and a nice dress shirt and everything. And it's like 8 o'clock at night and we're walking through the hospital all dressed up. It was kind of funny. We get checked in, we go, and I get my gown on, and we're in triage. The midwife came in and she looked. She didn't do like an actual exam because she said just by like looking, I looked like I was probably about the same amount dilated. It didn't look like a whole lot of change there. She didn't see any active bleeds, so she wasn't super worried about that, but that my discharge looked a little bit watery, so she was gonna go ahead and swab, and then they'll monitor me for a little bit and just send me on my way since I wasn't having contractions. So she did that, she left. I was laying in the bed, hooked up to the monitors. They were having a hard time getting a resting heart rate on her. She was really active in my belly. So we were just waiting for her to kind of mellow out so that they could get that. And then the midwife and the nurse all of a sudden came back in the room with this like big smirk on their face. And I was like, what's going on? And they said, so your water broke. The swab that they did of my amniotic fluid came back positive. I just looked at Cameron and I was like, so what does that mean? I honestly didn't know if that meant that I could go home, if I was gonna be staying there. I didn't know what that meant because it wasn't gushing out, it was just what she called a high leak. So I was leaking amniotic fluid, but it wasn't like pouring out of me. She told me that meant that I was staying and I was gonna have a baby. Immediately I got anxious because it was just so different than how my first went, and I was just worried that it was gonna be that one intervention leads to another, to another, to another, because I wasn't having contractions. So I didn't know how things were going to start, if my body would start on its own, or if they would start to kind of put me on the time clock and be like, your water's been broken for X amount of time, like we gotta get things going. So I had that in the back of my mind. And of course, pretty much right after my midwife walked out, they started unhooking me to move me to my room. The nurse mentioned, oh, we could just get a little Pitocin started and I'm sure this baby would be here in no time, which was not what I wanted. So immediately I was worried, I was stressed out. It was already starting off just so different. Yeah, we didn't take any clips in triage, walking into the hospital, anything, because I truly thought that we were gonna just be going back home. I actually drove myself to the hospital because Cameron had had a couple beers at dinner at the wedding, and we thought it was just best for me to go ahead and drive, and we didn't think we'd be staying. We thought we'd be going back home. So it was kind of funny when we got admitted, but we got moved to our room, and luckily my midwife knew what I wanted. She knew my plans. So she said, no, we do not need to do any Pitocin. We are not in a big hurry. If you'd like me to, I can break your water the rest of the way and see if that kind of helps things speed up or helps get contractions going. I was having like very mellow contractions at this point, like every 10 minutes. So very, very mellow, basically like period cramps. I could easily talk through them. I was not fazed by them. They didn't feel like anything that was productive per se, but I was having some at this point. 8:15, I was in triage. 9:10 is when the amniotic swab came back positive and they decided to go ahead and admit me. Around 9:50 or so is when I got moved to my room and started getting settled in, and my sister and my mom showed up around 10 p.m. We are at the hospital. Not how we thought we'd be starting this, but we were at a wedding and I had a little bit of bleeding. Midwife said it might be a good idea to come in and just get evaluated. So we kind of took our time, ate dinner, had a cupcake, and then came by kind of thinking we were just gonna be sent home, but turns out my water broke. So we are gonna be meeting our baby before too long. I'm not really having that strong of contractions, maybe some light ones here and there, but I am dilated to like a 5 or a 6. And they think once things kind of get going, they're gonna go fast, so.
Yeah, they said what was a high leak, so
yeah.
There's kind of a slow drip of a water break, but once that water clears out, it's go time. That's what they say.
So hopefully smooth and quick delivery, but I guess we're gonna have our baby.
It's crazy.
It actually worked out because I had kind of impulse ordered a couple days prior, like string lights and tea lights, and they had not even shown up yet, but they arrived on my doorstep just like an hour or two before my mom left my house from watching my daughter to come to the hospital. So she just went ahead and brought them with her. And I am actually so happy that I made that impulse purchase at the last second, because it really did make the room just so cozy, and I just really felt like I was so comfortable and just in just such a relaxing, like positive environment and state of mind. And it was just such a good feeling, like having the pretty lights strung up and just having my closest comfort people right beside me. So we took our time setting the lights up and whatnot, and around midnight or so I decided to go ahead and try and sleep. So I had not had my water broken at that point. They brought the peanut ball in and they hooked me back up to the monitors, since if I was going to be sleeping, they didn't want to keep waking me up every 25 minutes to do the Doppler and check the heart rate. So they hooked me up, I laid on the peanut ball, laid with my legs on the peanut ball on my side. I probably gave it about 30 minutes or so, and I just felt like I was laying there like just with the biggest eyes, like could not relax at all. I was way too excited. When you just know you are gonna meet your baby soon, it's just so hard to relax. I tried so hard to sleep because I knew it was gonna be a long night, and I just couldn't. So finally around like 2 a.m. or so, I was like, okay, you know what? I can't sleep clearly. We're in for the long haul. This is gonna be a long night no matter what. Let's go ahead and just have them break my water and see if that can get contractions to speed up, because if I go through all this with no sleep and then contractions start speeding up 24 hours later, and I just don't want to run out of gas. So I called her back in and said she could go ahead and break my water the rest of the way. And so around 2:30 or so is when they did that. Because I was as dilated as I was, and because the first one went so quick, they truly had no idea what to expect. So they were fully ready when they broke my water to catch a baby. Like, the midwife was there, she had all her stuff, she was telling the nurse, like, just be ready because we don't know how fast this is gonna go. They were fully ready to just catch a baby, and it just seemed kind of anticlimactic because they broke it and then it was just like, all right, thank you. No change. So they left me to just relax, to labor. I ended up just sitting on the ball and just chatted with my sister and my mom for a while. We just told stories, we just talked. It was really nice. It was really relaxing. It was really fun.
All right, Alyssa just had her water broke about
The rest of the way. Yeah.
About 40-ish minutes ago. Contractions are picking up a little bit in intensity, yeah?
Yep, picking up a little bit. I can still, I would say, probably talk through them, but
Yeah.
getting a little more intense, having to breathe a little bit more, headed in the right direction, hopefully.
Definitely are. Just praying for God's presence here and just help her stay in rhythm and all that good stuff. Currently bouncing on her ball. Got some mood lighting up over here. Vibey. God is good. Here we go.
We're ready for you, baby. I would say around like 1 a.m. probably, I could tell they were getting kind of tired. I was getting kind of tired. I decided to just go ahead and relax, and I was like, let's get in the bath. I loved the bath with my first daughter. I stayed in the bath for a long time with her. My water broke in the bath. I stayed in the bath all the way up until I needed to push with her. So we decided to try that. Cameron filled the bathtub up for me, and I got in, and within 2 minutes I said, nope, this is not gonna work. I don't like it in here. I feel too hot. Nope, this is not gonna work. So I just got out. I left the water in it because I thought maybe I'd want to get back in. But I got out of the bath and I just went ahead and sat on the toilet. It was dark in the bathroom. The door was open so I could see Cameron sitting in the chair directly across from me. And then my mom and my sister were both on like the little couch. I couldn't see them, but they were relaxing. And I was just sitting on the toilet. All three of them ended up falling asleep, and I was just kind of left to focus and just really like lean into my body and just like let it do what it needed to do. And I think with both of my labors, that was just the most helpful thing that I did to get things going, was to just turn off all the noise around me, all the distractions, stop timing my contractions, stop trying to think like when I need to go to the hospital, just really like zero in on my body and listen to it and just like ride the waves. So I did that. I sat on the toilet. Honestly, they were still so bearable. Like, I didn't feel like I was having like intense contractions. I thought it was gonna be a long time. I thought we were in for the long haul. A couple hours had passed, and around like 5 a.m. I had a couple really strong contractions that I could tell were more productive. And I looked over to my side to make eye contact with Cameron, and even though he was like dead asleep on the chair, all of a sudden his eyes just, boop, they just open and make eye contact with me. I don't know if he just like knew, he could just feel it. He made eye contact with me and I said, call her. So he called the midwife. They came back in, and it was like 5:20 or so. I walked out of the bathroom and I went and I climbed up on the bed on my hands and knees, because that's just what like I felt like I needed to do. But as soon as I did that, I felt like I lost all urge. Like, before that, I was feeling so much pressure, like I needed to push, like I needed to do it. And as soon as I climbed up on the bed like that, I felt like I lost all urge. It was so frustrating. I felt like I called them in and it was just for nothing. And I forgot to mention, after I got my water broke, she did check me. And at that point, I was like a 5 or 6, dilated and 100% effaced. And she could feel the baby's head, just like we could for weeks. But she said baby was at a +1 station, so she was a little bit below my pelvic bone. So that was all really good. But after that, I didn't get checked at all. I could hear conversation a little bit in the background when I climbed up on the bed on my hands and knees of my mom asking, is she 10 centimeters? Is she ready to push? And my midwife responded, which I loved. She said, she'll know what to do. Her body will know what to do. And it was just so empowering for her to just like trust me and to trust my body and to trust that I knew what I was doing, or that my body knew what it was doing. Because frankly, like in my head, I didn't know if it was time for her to push. I didn't know if it was time for her to come, but I was feeling pressure. So I climbed up there and I lost all of that, but I could kind of hear them mumbling in the background, like not sure if it was time yet or not. So I climbed off the bed and I said, I need to go pee. And I walked to the bathroom, went pee, On my walk back to the bed, I had a pretty strong contraction, so I just stood there and I just got through it. And then I climbed up on the bed and I just laid on my back. I felt like I had zero idea of how much time passed from the time I laid on my back to when she was in my arms. So I had to look back at the notes to see, and it was only 4 minutes. So I climbed up on the bed and the midwife was completely hands off. Nobody was touching me. Nobody was holding my leg. Nobody was counting or shouting at me. I was just laying on the bed on my back with my legs up on the bed. At 5:26, my body started involuntarily pushing. And so I just leaned into it, was hopeful that it was time because, again, had no idea how far dilated I was or anything. And at 5:28,
Look.
Good job, honey.
Monroe was born. They put her in my arms, and that is just the most incredible moment that you will ever experience in your life. With both of my daughters, that moment right there is just like core memory, the most amazing feeling that I want to experience a million times over again, but I can't take care of a million babies. So from there, I was just holding her. We waited for the cord to stop pulsing, and then Cameron got to cut it, and I just got to hold her, do the golden hour. I think they let me hold her for even longer than an hour. It may have been close to 2 hours. With my first, she started doing the breast crawl right away, like looking for the boob, looking for the milk. Monroe was not doing that. She was a lot more just like kind of chill, just kind of mellow. I had to kind of like direct her, like, here, are you hungry? And then eventually she did finally latch, and it just felt like, yes, like we did it. Like she's finally here, she's in my arms, she's nursing. This is everything that we waited for. Worth all of the weeks of throwing up, the scares, the bleeding, the pelvic rest, the uncomfortability, just like this is all what it's worth, this moment right here. It was incredible. It was kind of neat that it was like morning time because it was like 5:30 a.m. The sun was starting to come up. It just felt like such a nice feeling holding my baby, seeing the sunrise, having my family there with me. It was amazing. We did end up having Renly meet us at the hospital later that day to come meet her sister. It was a very sweet moment, but also very hard for me because I had missed her so much and I was feeling just very overwhelmed by it all, and I felt like everyone was just like shouting at her like, Renly, look, Renly, baby, like I just felt very overwhelmed. When I watched the footage back, it really wasn't that bad, but in my head, it just felt like everybody was just like shouting things at her and...
Baby.
Is this baby Sissy? Is this baby Sissy?
Baby.
That is a little baby, huh?
Okay.
Oh my goodness. All done?
Can you give her a
Oh,
kiss?
look at her little
Can you give her a
hands.
kiss? She's like, I want
Can you give her a kiss on her nose?
Can you give her a kiss?
Nice. So gentle with her nose, honey. You want her hat off? Okay.
It was overwhelming me. I do wish, thinking back, that I had given more instruction of everybody to just like let her explore, let her do what she wants to do, let her talk to me, let her just like be calm, because I did feel very overwhelmed with it all. And then when she left, she didn't want to leave me, obviously, and I just sobbed. She cried as they were taking her down the hallway. Of course, once they got onto the elevator, it was already out of her mind, but I was just sobbing. I just felt like I was just leaving her, abandoning her. We got to go home the next day in the morning, and when we brought her home, it was completely different reaction. Renly came running up, baby, and was so excited to see her little sister, and it was just like the most heartwarming experience that I could have like ever even experienced, just seeing my first daughter love on her little sister just so much. It was just, I just felt so like fulfilled and complete. It was just amazing. I truly couldn't have asked for a better experience with Monroe's delivery. I thought my first delivery was just unbeatable, truly, and so I was a little nervous this time around that it wouldn't be the same, and somehow it was just an even better experience. I just felt more confident. I just felt more prepared. I just felt like I knew what I was doing. I don't know, the second time around just feels so much different than the first. Just so many less unknowns, so much less anxiety just around the whole thing, and I think that that same pattern has continued on through being a mom to two. You know, there's just so much less anxiety and uncertainty than there is with your first. You've been there, you've done it, you know what you're doing, you know how to to take care of a baby. And it just truly was an amazing feeling to just have that confidence in myself as a mom and in my body. While I didn't plan to have two so close together, I can't imagine it any different. And I'm just so grateful for the timing and for God's timing and bringing me Renly's little sibling when it was the right time. And I'm truly just so grateful.
When wrapping this up, I realized I didn't talk much about my postpartum experience or really much about the transition from 1 to 2 kids. If you'd like me to make a separate video diving into these topics, let me know down in the comments, as well as any questions that you may have.